This is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from this week in tech. Coming up, Apple loses its grip on the title of world's most valuable company. Microsoft's market cap overtook Apple's this week as the smartphone maker battles threats of tariffs and weak demand for its flagship iPhones. Plus, Facebook battles accusations of racism. We hear exclusively from the former employee who wrote an explosive memo about being black at the social network. And it was the biggest shopping weekend of the year. We will unpack what the Black Friday Cyber Monday extravaganza brought in for Amazon. But first, to our lead, Apple's stronghold on the title of world's most valuable publicly traded company is no more. During Monday trading, Microsoft's market cap overtook Apple's for the first time in 8 years. Just last month, the iPhone maker's value topped $1.1 trillion, but since then, its share price has been shaved in the broader tech sell-off amidst concerns about weak demand for the flagship iPhone. Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman joined us to discuss.
It's pretty unbelievable. Maybe a year or two ago, if someone said, do you think Microsoft is going to pass Apple in market cap in 2 years, nobody would really believe that, especially in the current technology climate where a lot of people think that Apple has endless runway of growth. But if you look at what's happened over the past 2 months here, there have been so many concerns and so many issues with Apple in terms of iPhone sales, concerns about the prices of the high-end iPhones, the XR, the XS, and the XS Max. Concerns about long-term initiatives, if the company missed on previous big things like TV and voice, where it's not all too surprising. The question is, will it turn around and when?
So I have a chart here in my GTV library showing the rise of Apple as well as the fall in Apple and the rise in Microsoft. Aside from what Apple might be doing badly, what is Microsoft doing well?
Well, Satya Nadella has really turned the company around since taking over from Steve Ballmer a few years ago. The company has transitioned from a software company to a software and services company where they're trying to get their applications on as many devices as possible. You can buy an iPad now and fully load it with Microsoft apps. You can buy an Android phone now and fully load it with Microsoft apps. Whereas if you bought an Android device, or a Microsoft Surface even, you cannot fill it out with Apple services and Apple apps. And that is the big difference between the two companies. Microsoft works on every platform. Google, for its part, works on every platform, whereas Apple is very much glued to its own hardware. And Microsoft is clearly winning for itself on that approach, whereas Apple, for the last few years has been winning on its approach too. So I think there's room for both. But that's why Microsoft has been so successful lately, in addition to their infrastructure around services and servers.
Alphabet and Amazon, not far behind them. I mean, do we really see these four companies trading at a group closer to the top? And will it not be clear who has the title? And, going forward, will we see these shifts over and over again?
I think we're going to see this happening for, the next several months or even a couple of years, where it is those big four companies all vying for the top spot. I mean, some days when we're talking about this, it could be Amazon. Other days it could be Apple. And other days like today, it could be Microsoft.
Okay, Mark, hang on a sec, because I do want to get to another story. Apple also facing an antitrust case in the Supreme Court, which could have wide-ranging implications for the entire tech industry. The class action suit accuses Apple of maintaining a monopoly over app distribution on iPhones and, as a result, jacking up prices. U.S. Supreme Court justices Monday appeared inclined to allow the lawsuit to continue. I want to bring in Bloomberg Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr in D.C. Along with Mark Gurman. And certainly this wasn't good news for the stock either, Greg. But what did the Supreme Court justices signal about their position on this Apple case?
Well, the general sense was that they were going to let the lawsuit against Apple go forward. I counted only one real vote on Apple's side. That was Chief Justice John Roberts, and as many as 7 justices who, while taking different perspectives on the legal issues in the case, might be inclined to vote to let the lawsuit go forward. If so, that's bad news for Apple, obviously. It adds a source of pressure on them to reduce the 30% commissions that they charge to App Store developers.
So, Mark, walk us through the arguments here. Apple takes a huge cut from the App Store. We know that, 30%. It's been in contention before. But what makes this particular lawsuit significant?
So right now, Apple is really pivoting towards wanting investors to focus on its services revenue, right? And basically, the services revenue, the majority of it comes from that 30% cut. So if Apple takes any hit on that 30% because of this lawsuit, their services revenue is going to take a very significant impact. And that's why this lawsuit has put so much at stake for Apple.
So, Greg, you were saying, talk to us a little bit more about what's behind this particular case.
Yeah, so this is a consumer lawsuit suing, saying we're paying too much for apps at the App Store. And a focus of the lawsuit are the commissions that Mark was talking about there. And what Apple argues, and what the issue is at the Supreme Court, is whether the consumers can sue over commissions that were actually charged to the developers and not directly to the consumers. There's a Supreme Court precedent from 1977 that says only the direct purchasers of something can sue, claiming that they were overcharged.
Bloomberg's Greg Storr in D.C. and Mark Gurman from L.A. Well, Apple shares took another beating Tuesday after President Trump hinted he might include iPhones in the next round of tariffs on Chinese imports. CEO Tim Cook went on a charm offensive, spending the day with Ivanka Trump touring schools in Idaho. The trip provided an opportunity for extended conversations with the president's daughter and senior advisor just before Trump was due to hold a key meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Buenos Aires at the G20. Tom Forte, analyst at D.A. Davidson, and Mark Gurman joined Brad Stone to discuss.
You have to assume that everything out of China will be tariffed. And I think that on that assumption, then you have to think about who has pricing power. And if you look at Apple and you take, for example, the least expensive new iPhone, the XR, is 7.5% more expensive than last year's least expensive new iPhone, the 8. So I do think Apple has pricing power and versus their peers can better withstand tariffs, assuming the next round is everything coming out of China.
Well, I mean, Tom, let's put the potential impact aside. I mean, do you think this is real? Does the president mean it?
Absolutely. So if you think about to date, you've had multiple rounds of tariffs. You have one tariff in place today that escalates from a 10% tariff to a 25% tariff on January 1st. So I think at this point in time, you have to make the assumption that tariffs are real and that there's more to come. And as far as what more could be tariffed, I think you have to assume that everything coming out of China may be subject to a tariff.
So Mark Gurman, Tim Cook is spending some quality time with Ivanka Trump today. Will that make an impact? And how has the administration's relationship been with Apple? Does Tim have the currency with the administration to make an impact here?
That's a great question, Brad, and I think they do. If you saw what happened in early September, Apple put out a statement saying that two of their most valuable products, the AirPods and the Apple Watch, would be impacted by the tariffs. This was on the first $200 billion worth of goods. A couple days later, not too long after that, the Trump administration came out and said, okay, we're not going to allow tariffs on the Apple Watch or the AirPods anymore. Now Trump has this day to spend with the president's daughter and obviously a close advisor. Surely to discuss this is going to be one of the topics on the agenda besides the schools they're visiting. And so I think they have that sway power with the Trump administration as they've shown in the past. And they'll probably discuss how this would be bad for Apple, which, at the end of the day, despite exporting a lot of goods from China, is a US-based company.
So, Tom, let's say that Tim is not successful today making his case to the president's daughter, and we do see a 10% tariff on iPads and iPhones that have not been previously affected by this trade war. So you talked a little bit about how Apple could potentially mitigate the impact with the XR. What about the XS, those premium-priced phones that, some suppliers and analyst reports say maybe it's not doing as well as Apple had hoped?
Sure. So generally speaking, I think investors are underestimating the ability of companies like Apple to mitigate the risk of tariffs. And for example, what you're seeing is the Chinese government is actively devaluing its currency. So that'll take some of the sting out of tariffs. We're also hearing that in some instances, the Chinese government is subsidizing manufacturers who might be affected by it. Additionally, a lot of Apple suppliers are already moving their supply chain out of China. And really, on a short-term basis, the big winner from the prolonged China-U.S. trade war is Vietnam, as you're seeing a lot of manufacturers starting to make products in Vietnam rather than China. So I do think that Apple and other companies that are heavily reliant on China for their supply chain have a lot of opportunities to mitigate risk from tariffs. As it pertains specifically to the XS, I think the good news for Apple the last two product cycles has been with the higher average selling prices, they don't have to sell as many units to bear the fruits from a financial standpoint.
Tom Fort there of D.A. Davidson and Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman with our own Brad Stone. Coming up, how one big tech investor is navigating big volatility from Apple to Microsoft to Tesla ahead. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio, listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. It's been a volatile time for tech stocks, with Facebook's top execs under scrutiny for their handling of Russian election meddling, and Apple in limbo amidst trade and tariff threats. On Thursday, ARK Investments CEO Cathie Wood joined us to talk about her outlook.
Apple, because analysts are focused mostly on units and ASPs, or average selling prices, very simplistically, I think it's really reached a period of undervaluation now, having come down this much since earnings. I think they've pushed the pricing envelope a little bit too much, but I think their services business is becoming very interesting. Not only the App Store, but all of the ways they're getting involved with healthcare and augmented reality. I think this is going to become more of a services model, which is a more higher multiple, or it'll achieve a higher valuation at the end of the day.
Still, there's this uncertainty about trade. How concerned are you about potential tariffs on the iPhone?
Well, before I heard today that Peter Navarro was back on the invite list to go to Argentina with President Trump, I was much more optimistic. He's a saber rattler, and I thought that they were going to leave him out and let Lighthizer and Larry Kudlow do the work behind the scenes. I do think a lot of work is going on behind the scenes, and I think we're seeing movement from China on their own economy is slowing down, so they are cutting taxes internally, they're cutting import duties, and I have a feeling when we turn around at the end of the day, we're going to see, at the conclusion of negotiations, perhaps not this weekend, lower tariffs throughout the world. And I actually think this is going to be a very positive result long term.
Peter Navarro, one of Trump's top trade advisors, what about Microsoft? Do you see Microsoft going on a longer bull run from here with the rise of the cloud?
Yeah, I think Microsoft has done a lot of things right. In the cloud, of course, gaming, of course, and I think it's earned its way back into the good graces of investors, even though its base business, Windows and so forth, that we see is having more and more technical problems. So I don't think, longer term, I do think Apple will continue to lead the charge. It's going through a period right now of uncertainty just because of very short-term thinking about pricing and units. But you've got upwards of 1 billion users of iPhones and other Apple products around the world, and that's only growing year by year. So we're pretty excited about the long-term prospects for Apple.
What about Amazon, Cathie? Because this is a company that's faced verbal and Twitter assaults from the president, now under fire from German regulators, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in the show. Do you think tariffs could have a big impact on Amazon, given the company's reliance on these third-party sellers?
I don't think so. I think at the end of the day, Amazon is all about customer first, delighting the customer. And I think that's awfully hard for politicians to fight when their electorates love a product. And I feel the same way about Apple. So if we get temporary tariffs, I do think they will be just that, temporary. These are products that delight the consumer, and these are the people that politicians want to make happy.
Now, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Trump administration has set up this roundtable with tech executives, including the CEOs of Microsoft and Google, Sundar Pichai, who is scheduled to testify on Capitol Hill next week. Do you think anything promising can come out of a meeting like this that, would impact an investment strategy?
Well, I do think it's good that they're talking, much better than arguing in the media. So, and I think that at the end of the day, President Trump wants our innovative leaders to continue to dominate out there. We do see that China has on its set of priorities being #1 in artificial intelligence and all kinds of technology. And I think President Trump is responding to that. So I think we'll be in a how do we work together mode as opposed to an adversarial mode. So I think it's good news.
Meantime, Kathy, Facebook's in the middle of a PR nightmare and shares are way down since that July peak. Concerns that go all the way to the very top, Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, and how they handled Russian election meddling, fake news. Do you think that this is going to continue to punish the stock, given that we haven't yet seen concrete evidence that this is impacting engagement among users?
Well, we got the first signs in their last quarterly report that it has impacted engagement slightly, not as much as many might have thought. What we are also seeing, though, is in terms of top brands, Facebook is losing its status there. And when that happens, usually we do have periods of underperformance by the business and by the stocks. Thank goodness they have Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and other properties to monetize, because we do think they are going to be continuing to lower the ad loads on Facebook proper and trying to right that ship. They have a little bit of work to do.
ARK Investment CEO Kathy Wood there. Coming up, our exclusive interview with HPE CEO Antonio Neri. It has been a big year for enterprise M&A. Will HPE be getting into the game or waiting it out on the sidelines? That is next. And later we hear from the former employee who claims Facebook has a racism problem, and it doesn't just impact workers, but Black users of the social network as well. This is Bloomberg. Now to HPE's big bet on the so-called intelligent edge and CEO Antonio Neri's commitment to spend $4 billion over the next 4 years to make more data more useful to companies. This comes along with developing more tech in security, automation, AI, machine learning. I caught up with Neri from Madrid, where he was attending HPE's Discover conference, and asked about when he expects to see a return on that big investment. Take a listen.
We believe the edge, or the intelligent edge, is the next frontier, is a massive opportunity for all of us, and that's why I made the announcement at the HP Discover in Las Vegas that we will invest $4 billion over the next 4 years. We will see the return on that investment over the next 2 years. This is a business that's really growing fast. In fact, we're growing the business double digits. And what we are doing there is take the core Aruba platform and adding the incremental capabilities needed to move from what we call the edge to the intelligent edge. Aruba brought the connectivity, and we expanded connectivity with SD-WAN. We added analytics, we added security, and now here at HP Discover, we're announcing the IoT-ready aspect of the infrastructure and the platform, which is a software-defined platform, so that we can move from billions of things between people and places to trillions of things. And that's the scale that's needed to power this new intelligent edge.
Now, one example of this at work is the biotech company Jungla, which is using HPE compute power to essentially power genetic testing at scale. What does your speed make possible there that would otherwise not be?
Yeah, we are really proud to partner with Jungla, one of the startups in the precision medicine. But this is part of a broader initiative, which we call it Tech Impact 2030, which is a partnership with the World Economic Forum. In September, we announced a partnership with the Purdue University to improve agriculture, to improve the quality of crops and the quantity of crops. In fact, we have a fantastic use case here with live crops, so we can show how we do that with them. But with Joomla, we are really focused on the precision medicine, and it's all about improving the research on disease and the mutation of that disease. And using our memory-driven compute, actually they saw 250% improvement in performance on the large pool of data that they use to really understand the mutation of that disease.
So what do you mean by a 250% improvement on the understanding of the data?
Well, think about it. If it used to take, days to extract the insight of that data, now they can do it in seconds. So that's remarkable because obviously they want to make sure they focus on the right aspect of the research so that eventually they can pass the research to people who can provide the cures. And today is all about time to value, and that will improve time to cure over a long period of time. So for us, is bringing that technology to do good, because our purpose is to advance the way we live and work. And so it's perfectly aligned to what we're really focused on.
Now, we've seen a lot more consolidation in enterprise software this year, but it seems like tech hardware players have been staying on the sidelines. Old HP was quite acquisitive. What is your appetite for M&A at HPE?
Listen, if there is the right asset with the right complementary IP and the right talent, we will evaluate it. And we really like to think about the Aruba-like type of acquisitions because we want to stay true to the core of what we're designing and then add those capabilities to a platform because customers really like what we're doing versus trying to consolidate or do a PE-like type of approach. We really focus on accelerating that innovation through IP and talent acquisition.
Do you think we'll see more deals in general in tech hardware in 2019?
Hard to say. I mean, listen, the valuations are really high at this point in time. At least that's my point of view. Obviously, we think there will be more consolidation over time. But I think now the landscape has been set. What customers are looking for are IT solutions in blocks where basically they can accelerate time to value through the data. And so more and more, that infrastructure has to become more optimized for the specific workloads where compute, storage, networking, memory, all coming together to deliver a specific outcome. And that's why we have this unique vision called composability. We think cloud is not a destination, it is an experience, and we need to compose that cloud to the specific workloads. And so ultimately, all the assets have to come together in a way that they can deliver those solutions with the speed and agility that customers are looking for.
So what do you think a potentially newly public Dell would mean for the broader tech landscape, HPE aside?
Well, I think opens new opportunities, right? I mean, we live in a time where disruption is accelerating, so speed matters, right? And then control points and intellectual property matters. So I think, depending on what's happening in the market, we may see an acceleration of that. But again, valuation have to make sense. And at this point in time, I believe valuations are a little bit high, and that's why we see a little bit of correction going on in the market. We'll see. At this point in time, our focus is really on execution. And I think this year we have done a really good job. Really proud on our execution front.
My exclusive conversation with HPE CEO Antonio Neri. Coming up, at a time when Facebook is in the spotlight for leadership issues, former employee Mark Luckey says he never heard from Mark Zuckerberg or Sheryl Sandberg when he raised big concerns about race. We'll talk to Luckey exclusively next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology and be sure to follow our global breaking news network TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Facebook is battling criticism on all fronts, now from an ex-worker who says the company has a racism problem. Former Facebook employee Mark Luckey wrote a lengthy internal memo explaining how difficult it was to be black and employed at the social network. In the memo, Lucky wrote, Facebook's disenfranchisement of black people on the platform mirrors the marginalization of its black employees. Racial discrimination at Facebook is real. He says he expected some sort of change or at least a reply from the CEO or COO. Instead, he got a private message from one of the highest level black employees at Facebook saying his experience may not be representative and taking it personally. Mark Lucky joined us exclusively from Atlanta to discuss.
To be black at Facebook is really finding your community because you don't see a lot of people who look like you. The majority of Facebook's population is white and Asian. So when you see other black employees, you look to them for support. And that's how a lot of the conversations that were the start of this post came from.
Now, you write in the memo that not only did you feel marginalized, that you would walk by employees and at least 2 or 3 times a day, employees would look at you, tap and hold their wallets and shove their hands into their pockets. You know, why did you decide to go public with these feelings?
Because there are so many employees who are going through the same thing. Prior to the post going internal, I would have a conversation with an employee, a black employee, every single week at least, who would say, you know, I'm going through this, or I'm having a tough time, you know, with diversity on my team, or I'm being called hostile, or things like that. And so even if every black employee didn't experience everything that was listed in the post, chances are they've experienced at least a little bit of it. And so it was tough to walk through the Facebook campus and know that this is a company that promotes inclusion and diversity, but that not being reflected in my day-to-day experiences there.
Now, Facebook executives, including Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg, have had a lot to say about some of the other criticism they've been getting recently about, you know, this delay, deny, deflect with respect to Russian election meddling, leadership issues, and more. But they didn't say anything to you about this?
They did not, and that is really uncharacteristic of the company. Usually, for something that is this conversational inside the company, there is some comment from Mark or Sheryl or somebody from that team to say, okay, we're thinking about it at least. But a lot of black employees felt even more marginalized because they didn't get the same treatment or the same conversation that other issues may have received.
Now, you did get a response from Ime Archibong, who is one of the highest-ranking black employees at Facebook, who said to you, I guess I'm just confused and pretty hurt because I voted for your hire, was inspired by your willingness to strengthen the community, and that post just seems so out of character. He later tweeted that, you know, many have diverse experiences, diverse perspectives, but that your experience, you know, may not represent the experience of others. What do you make of that response?
Well, it's interesting because about a week before I handed in my resignation, one of the employees told me the only black employee who gets to be their authentic self is Ime. And that's really unfortunate because I think there's a disparity between the people who are close to Mark and his team and the employees who are on the ground level. So I think it's disingenuous to say that this is just my experience or that I'm out there just, you know, putting out all kinds of information about the company that isn't true. Because I was so visible in the company is why I decided to put this out, that I didn't want to be just another black employee who left the company and didn't say anything. And actually, the day that I put the post up internally, I had 3 different people come up to me and say, actually, I handed in my resignation for the very same reason. And so I do it for them, and I'm doing it for all these people.
Facebook did respond. We got this from a spokesperson. We've been working diligently to increase the range of perspectives among those who build our products and serve the people who use them throughout the world. The growth and representation of people from more diverse groups working in many different functions across the company is a key driver of our ability to succeed. Now, importantly, you point out in your memo, this is not just about employees' experience at Facebook. You believe that this extends to the experience of black users on Facebook. How so?
Well, what's happening with black users is that there's a lack of cultural competency inside of Facebook because most of the people who work at the company are white and Asian. They really don't think of the black experience, which is a shame because black users are overperforming on the platform. And so it's a missed opportunity, it's a missed financial opportunity for Facebook to not engage with those users in a meaningful way, and also to make their experience on the platform much more difficult through all the ways that it's taking action and inaction.
Now, this, had me recall the incident back in 2016 where there were Black Lives Matter slogans written on a wall at Facebook. Employees had crossed that out and written All Lives Matter. Mark Zuckerberg did condemn that. You also worked at Twitter, and I'm curious how your experience at Facebook compared to your experience at Twitter, and whether it's more deep-seated than perhaps Zuckerberg realizes.
Yeah, the great thing about Facebook is that there are posters all through every one of its offices, particularly in its headquarters, many of them which proclaim Black Lives Matter. But as I mentioned in the post, Black Lives may matter, but you're not seeing Black lives as frequently inside of Facebook's headquarters. I think the biggest difference between Twitter and Facebook is the scale, and that Twitter really made a lot of changes in the last couple of years, a lot of improvements. Their Black Employee Resource Group is active and engaging with the community. Someone internally asked me, do you think this problem just happens at Facebook? And of course, no. But for Facebook to proclaim that it is connecting communities and really supporting these groups, what happens after they get hired? You have to think about being inclusive and not just hiring Black employees.
What's your response to the general leadership issues, both Zuckerberg and Sandberg under fire for how they've handled this Russian situation? Do you think that they should still be running this company?
I think that's up to other people to decide whether they should be running the company. I think what's happening in tech is that the leaders inside of tech are thinking the best possible cases, the best possible use cases for their technology, and not thinking about the worst. And that's where you see issues like the Russian hackings, like the fake news issues, and of course this issue about the Black people on its platform. So it would behoove tech companies, not just Facebook, but all, to think about, okay, how is this going to get in the hands of the wrong people, and how can we curb that before it goes to market?
Now, as I understand it, you've quit tech and you've moved to Atlanta, and you're done with Silicon Valley for good. Is that correct? That
is correct, unfortunately.
So why? Can an employee like you help Silicon Valley change?
Well, I tried to affect as much change as possible. I had a great run at Twitter and ultimately moved on because there was more that I could do, and the company wouldn't have been the great place to do that. Facebook, I was very determined to stay there as long as possible, and I was going through issues, with living in a mostly white neighborhood. I was going through issues with having my work curbed at every level, and so I said to myself, I can't give up my social life, my personal life, my health, and my security to work for a company that isn't supporting me, and also not supporting a lot of people who work in diversity. They hire a lot of these people, but they're finding that their efforts are being curtailed left and right.
Former Facebook employee Mark Lucky there. Meantime, the pressure is rising on Facebook's chief operating officer, Sheryl Sandberg, for her particular role in responding to Russian meddling and more. Bloomberg spoke to 8 current and former employees from her side of the organization, some who now blame her for Facebook's woes. They say at times Sandberg prioritized her own brand over Facebook's, and they also say she didn't address issues quickly enough or treated them only as perception issues rather than getting to the root of the problem. Brian Weiser, senior analyst at Pivotal Research, and Bloomberg senior executive editor Brad Stone joined us Monday to discuss.
I have to say that the nuances were really useful, and anyone who hasn't read Sarah's article absolutely should. The bigger point around Sandberg is that, it does occur to me that I wonder if she's actually, after reading it, I wonder if she's been so constrained in her role because she doesn't have absolute control over Facebook. If she has any control, it's over her own self. So maybe that's what you focus on if you're never going to have complete autonomy over the whole company. I'd throw out 2 things. I think that while there's elevated criticism around Sandberg right now, I think there appropriately was, certainly by some, myself perhaps included, elevated concern about Sandberg last year. I think, when certainly when Facebook's head of policy for EMEA goes and lies or actively misleads the British Parliament back in February, that's a problem. When their advertising products are actively misleading their customers, that's a problem. When they're consistently having metrics issues, again, these are also under Sandberg's responsibility. So I think that there are a lot of things that she's, appropriately going to be criticized for, but it's not clear where the responsibility ends with her versus Zuckerberg. And frankly, the bigger problem is maybe more foundational inside of the whole company from the ground up.
On that note, here's what Zuckerberg told CNN about his partnership with Sandberg and his intention to continue to work with her for many, many years. Take a listen.
Sheryl is a really important part of this company and is leading a lot of the efforts to address a lot of the biggest efforts that the biggest issues that we have. And she's been an important partner for me for 10 years. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done together. And I hope that we work together for decades more to come.
Brad, what do you make of that? I mean, I think Brian's point is an interesting one that, maybe if you can't control a lot at the company, the one thing you can't control is yourself.
Yeah, no, I think, it was a sign of support that Mark was making for Sheryl. Clearly he doesn't want to throw her under the bus. That relationship will continue. But I think Brian's point is right, that, that Sheryl, might be constrained and that Mark and Sheryl probably need to work a little bit on their partnership, to make sure that they're not addressing the messaging aspects of these crises, but getting to the underlying problem.
Brian, would you like to see Facebook bring in a third person? I mean, there is reporting that, Mark Zuckerberg had been looking for a third person to handle some of these policy issues, but ultimately decided not to do so.
Well, I mean, I think that the idea is that person would report through Sheryl Sandberg, if I understood it correctly, unless I misunderstood it. But I would throw this out. The big issue is a board-level issue. I mean, let's go back to the days of Yahoo, right, and Marissa Mayer. For all the criticism that Mayer rightfully deserved, after about 2 years, this was no longer Mayer's fault. It was the board's fault. So, to be clear, the problems at Facebook have been pretty obvious. If they were obvious to the President of the United States of America in 2016, who told Zuckerberg, you got problems, they've had over 2 years, at least, of problems that have been pretty systemic. The board has to have been aware for quite a while. And so then the question is, what do the independent directors do? All they can do, I mean, they're the ones who are best positioned to get to the root of the problem, to figure out what is best for the company. The fact is that if the company is, in fact, entirely dependent on Mark Zuckerberg, that's not a company, that's a sole proprietorship. They've got bigger problems.
Many of the board members predate Sandberg and predate her joining the board as well. Brian is alluding to, Brad, another story about UK Parliament seizing internal Facebook documents as part of their investigation into the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which is kind of huge that we're seeing another government take such extreme action. Walk us through what happened here.
Yeah, it's complicated. You have to go back 4 years when a small app company called 643 sued Facebook, saying that it was favoring some app developers over another, saying that it was being inauthentic in how it communicated privacy controls and what information it collected. So that lawsuit was here in California. The company was able to obtain through discovery some internal Facebook communications. Fast forward to last week when the British Parliament, very upset over Mark Zuckerberg's failure to testify in the UK, to the testimony that Brian alluded to earlier being disingenuous, went and got the founder of this app company, 643, and got him to turn over those internal correspondences that they had obtained through the court process. So what did they say? I mean, it could be internal communication between executives, including Zuckerberg, about how Facebook obtains information from who and whether they're being disingenuous in terms of privacy controls and how they manage that information. Could be very damaging to Facebook.
Brian Wieser, senior analyst at Pivotal Research and Bloomberg Tech's Brad Stone. Coming up, we head to Bloomberg's Year Ahead conference, where we will talk to Samsung next President David An, what he has to say about the slowing global smartphone market. Coming up. Plus, Amazon saw its biggest shopping day in history on Cyber Monday, topping its very own Prime Day. Which categories performed best? And the site's top sellers. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg's The Year Ahead Summit Wednesday brought together global CEOs to tackle topics facing every executive in the coming year. Everything from Brexit to trade talks and the future of technology has been part of these discussions. Bloomberg Tech's Selena Wang sat down with Samsung next president David An to talk about the coming year for the tech giant. She started by asking about its transition from a hardware company to a software company. Take a listen.
There's these designations that we all use to label companies. Are they hardware companies or are they software companies? And I believe that in the future, we won't use these designations because companies will just be successful or not, and products will just work or not. And the most successful products will most likely have what I call a thoughtful integration with hardware and software. The challenge is, though, is if you think about hardware or media even, when you launch a product, when you bring it out to the marketplace, it has to be perfect, right? Because once you sell that TV in a store, once that TV show is on air, you can't really change it. But of course, the opposite is true with software. The motto that most software companies live by is to launch early and iterate. You literally use your consumers to provide you with feedback so you can improve the product. So the challenge for companies on either side, if you come from a hardware background, is really understanding how you can be more agile and use your customers for feedback to create products and experiences that work. And then on the software side, you may launch and you can iterate, but you have to cross a certain threshold of quality so that it works for people. And this is why companies from both sides historically haven't always been able to work together effectively. And it's improving now, and what we're trying to do is within this hardware company, bring in people who have the software and services expertise to kind of inject that DNA into the bloodstream. So that we could have the best of both.
The smartphone market is slowing, and Samsung and other companies have been trying to revitalize it with new innovations like the foldable smartphone that Samsung is coming out with. So as Chief Innovation Officer, how are you looking at the smartphone business in the future for Samsung? And what's your plan to really reinvigorate growth and innovation there?
Well, one of the things about Samsung is that while we have a very successful mobile business and we sell 2 TVs a second, which a lot of people don't realize, we sell in any given year 500 million displays of one form or another. And for us, that is not just separate businesses, but a huge opportunity to connect these devices so that they can create complementary experiences. So as we think about things like IoT and connected homes, as we think about the proliferation of AI, we think about these displays as touch points where we can gather information and then provide experiences that are chained together. So for example, for many people, the biggest investment that they'll ever make is really in their home. And yet when you leave your home, you have no idea of what's going on. You have no relationship or ability to communicate with it as an entity. And so what we're seeing now is not just our company, but other companies giving consumers the ability to have a relationship and a dialogue with their homes. And this is supported and will be sort of fortified by having cameras and sensors and everything from climate control and energy usage to lighting, all connected. And so when you talk about a specific device like a smartphone or a TV, they can't just be seen as standalone devices, but seen as one of a portfolio of things that can give consumers a better experience. So when I'm away from my home, I might be able to send a message to my family, and it shows up on the display in our refrigerator. Or when I walk in front of my TV, the photos that I took over Thanksgiving break can easily be shown on my TV or the TV of someone that I care to share it with. So as we think about the future of our businesses, it's not just a pure hardware business, but we think about how we can create great experiences, right? Which again is what I call the thoughtful integration of hardware and software.
How is Samsung navigating the current trade tensions between the US and China? And is that impacting your investment strategy at all?
Well, I'm not in the hardware business. I focus on working with startups, as I said. And our belief is that while Silicon Valley is a fantastic source of innovation, for me, it's almost more of a mentality. It's a way of thinking. And so innovation can be found everywhere. And we have set up offices and we have done deals all over the globe. So we will continue to do that. And we want to be wherever the entrepreneurs are.
That was Samsung Next President David Ng with Bloomberg Tech's Selena Wang. Up next, Amazon claims it was a record-breaking Cyber Monday for the online retailer. We'll unpack the numbers. This is Bloomberg. Cyber Cyber Monday sales hit an all-time high this year, and Amazon was no exception to the record-breaking. Tuesday, the retail giant said it had its biggest shopping day in history on Cyber Monday, with the most products ordered worldwide than any other day. The holiday weekend set a record for Amazon as customers purchased millions more products this Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday compared to the same period last year. Customers worldwide bought more than 18 million toys and 13 million fashion items on Black Friday and Cyber Monday combined. Bloomberg opinion Shira Ovide told Brad Stone she wasn't so convinced about the spin.
You can comfortably ignore everything that Amazon says about holiday shopping trends this year and every year. So the word record, Amazon used it 7 times in its news release this morning about holiday sales over the Thanksgiving weekend. But of course, as is Amazon's habit, there was no specificity around the numbers. Is 18 million toys a lot or a little? It is a record Cyber Monday for every retailer in the United States across the industry, according to Adobe.
That's right. Internet penetration is growing. E-commerce is growing. Right. It's natural to be a record. But, you know, there was some stuff in here, right? 20% more sales from small and medium-sized business. Does, Shira, this not count for anything?
Yeah, I mean, it's directionally useful. It's interesting to see what people are buying. Often that reflects what Amazon is heavily promoting or discounting. So, yeah, it's useful to know that they sold a lot of Echoes and Instant Pots, but it's not as revelatory as Amazon suggests, no.
I'm always, interested in how Amazon uses these moments to basically promote the things it cares about. So we've got the 4-star stores here. It's a new physical star format. We got the Ring devices for your home. We got all the Echo devices. These are the things that Amazon wants to highlight, wants people to pay attention to for the holiday season, right?
That's right. And I was struck looking on Amazon over the Thanksgiving holiday, how much Amazon was promoting its own products. So you saw a lot of deep discounts on Echo devices and the Ring, which is the home security company that Amazon now owns. And as you said, there was some promotions for things like Prime Video releases and Amazon's digital music service and the 4-star stores and bookstores. So it is interesting to see how much Amazon uses the holidays to promote itself. Perhaps no big surprise there.
So I'm going to serve you up a softball here. Amazon appears to have coined a phrase in this press release, the Turkey 5. I had not heard of this before. What is it? And Shira, what do you make of it?
I had not heard of it before either. So apparently Turkey 5, it refers to the 5 days between Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday. So I guess a frenzy of Thanksgiving-related deals and shopping. I have seen it somewhat catch on in the analyst community, much to my chagrin. So if you could see my eyes rolling this morning when I read Turkey 5, it would be quite a sight.
Bloomberg opinion Shira Ovide there with our own Brad Stone. And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. Next week, Google CEO Sundar Pichai is testifying before Congress on the Hill. We will be all over it, and we'll bring you all the latest in tech throughout the week. You can tune in every day, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. We are live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology. And be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.